Welcome to the Promise Podcast, where we discuss how brands can deliver on their promise with a great customer experience and business impact. I'm your host, Harald Lamberts, and in each episode, I talk to business executives, thought leaders, and founders about how to achieve effective collaboration across departments, such as brand, marketing, product development, customer experience, and support, all with one goal in mind: a seamless customer journey with great business results. Today, we are happy to have Pirner with us. Welcome, Peter.
Hi, Harald. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, nice to have you on the show. Peter, as you know, first question we always start with every guest is, what is your favorite brand and how do they actually deliver on their promise? Like, how do they provide a great customer experience to you?
I give you a horribly boring answer, but I'm really convinced of that. In terms of customer experience, my still by far preferred brand is Amazon. Because I use Amazon quite regularly to buy a lot of my tech gimmicks I need for my podcast studio I do myself. And whenever something goes wrong, they solve the problem in a minute. Very little things go wrong. They are generous, make things easy, and they never let me down. And I think that is one of the key aspects: ease of use, never let people down. And if you made a mistake, solve that quickly. These are the things that characterize companies that deliver an outstanding customer experience. And and you can think about Amazon whatever you want from a more political point of view or economic point of view. But they know their job and they do their job really well.
So you can really rely on them and you can trust them. So you know you're not running any risks. Yeah. So
exactly.
That's great.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, let me properly introduce you, and then I'll let you also add to that. So nice to have you. Peter Pirner is a well-known C expert in Germany and beyond. And in that role, he's a keynote speaker, advisor, coach, or mentor, I should say, and podcast host himself with the CX Talks podcast, you might know. With 12,000 followers on LinkedIn, he's a well-known figure. Until a few years ago, he spent nearly 25 years at Kantar in Germany. He's passionate about the usage of data and insights in companies. This does not necessarily mean, in his own words, that those need to come from research, which I'm sure we'll dive into more in this podcast. Yeah. But with that, welcome, Peter.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the nice introduction.
Anything you would add to that, or is that a good reflection, or like maybe you can talk?
That's quite a nice reflection, actually.
Cool.
I think what is important to understand. I'm not a data analyst, but my job for many years in Kantar was to visit the biggest clients we had to discuss what they should do with their customer satisfaction or customer experience programs, or how they could integrate even more research offerings to improve what they deliver to their clients.
And knowing Kantar, they would probably most likely approach you with a research question. Is that fair? Does that mean that you would actually then, or correct me if I'm wrong, but how did you then actually expand the need or try to dig deeper into what their actual challenge was? Or like, how can you say a little bit about that?
That would have been the approach, let's say, in the very beginning, because actually I spent a lot of time with pricing research, with brand research, with what you name it, and then you would start with a research question. And after almost, let's say, after my first 8 years, out of a sudden, the big automotive customer feedback programs needed to be put on Katie, which means on telephone interviews. They still were made with a questionnaire. And as Katie is quite expensive, this was a completely new, different game. And then out of a sudden, you need technology. Yeah. And I rolled out for 4 global major brands, international voice of the customer programs in a management position. And what we learned over that time is that customer feedback in this area is not anymore research, or it's not just pure research. These are different buying points. These are different problems you want to solve. Yes, it's also about insights, but it's mainly about a very specific insight on a specific touch point. The questionnaires became shorter. The technology became much more yeah, savvy. So, how to say? You could do a lot of things. In the beginning, it was very difficult to translate open answers, so you avoided them. Now today, it's so easy that you would
Yeah.
not even avoid them. You want
Right.
to ask them, and so we
Now you
developed a
now you
whole.
even get richer content from it. I guess now it's actually a disadvantage if you don't. I guess. Huh?
It's a disadvantage if you don't, but you don't necessarily get richer answers if you asked
Okay.
if you don't manage
True.
the process of asking well, you
Mm-hmm.
know.
Yeah.
And over time, actually, I was heading also the global area of customer experience management in Kanta. So we started to negotiate with companies like Medallia or Qualtrics
Yeah.
on corporations. And then I learned that selling this sort of stuff is a totally different business than selling research. And this also means that you were not approached by a research question. You were approached by a CX question. And so we framed everything, but at the same time, we were always able to link that back to to a more insightful research. But at the same time, we also needed to dig deeper into the organizations of the company to understand what kind of problem do we really solve. And we made trainings, and we also made a lot of additional analysis. But the classical voice of the customer program was more a logistical problem, a political problem, less so a research problem.
Yeah.
That was
No, and I think what you're saying is there's of course a need for foundational need-based research, like to understand your customers for a proposition and marketing offering, marketing the offering and
Sure.
understand what your customers are looking for. And there's of course the customer feedback on your current touch points and your current offering to learn what could be improved and gain insights on specific touch points that are already in place. Yeah. So like,
Yes.
of course, there's a purpose for both, but it's also interesting, of course, to connect those two at some point. Like maybe you can say a little bit of, is that something that you also dealt with, or is that still, were there so many
Sure,
challenges
and
in
I
the voice of
think
the customer itself alone?
actually all these developments come a bit in waves. So actually, I fought for many years against the anonymous research because I needed to have it personalized. Then you had the wave, you need to act on the feedback you got. And this is not a research problem at all. This is just
No.
a corporate development problem.
Yeah.
And I think today we are in a position that we can integrate, as we understand there are different silos in a company. We understand they are, and we understand probably they even have better information than you have in your own silo. And I think only now, these days, we start to integrate all these different data sources into one slightly more holistic picture. Having the customer journey as the frame concept. But I think in real life, most of the companies just have that as a vision, and they are already happy if they have small pieces of it, where they also can ask at least two silos to combine the information they have. For that reason, I think from an analytical point of view today, we are in a much better position than we were 10 years ago, and we still have 10 years to go, not because of the technology, but because of the maturity of the companies to integrate all the other information that is also available.
For sure. Yeah. So, and I think especially large organizations with multiple departments and thousands of employees and customers, of course, it is also very challenging to get everybody aligned in a like unified or at least connected way of working. So I completely recognize what you say. I mean, we are helping a lot of organizations with actually customer journey management, if you will. And then, of course, it does indeed provide a great context for all your insights, but it also, of course, complicates the collaboration. So we also see that many organizations then first start maybe with a few use cases instead of trying to get the whole entire organizations to collaborate on a journey perspective from day one. Rather, actually, maybe start small and then organically increase the amount of silos or amount of use cases that you kind of work with. Does that make sense for you? Like, is that recognizable?
Absolutely. What I saw is actually that there is, at the moment, there is one area where the journey management thinking and analytics work quite nicely, which is customer service, because they try to change a lot of processes there. And for that reason, they rethink the whole process. And they are a big enough silo on their own so that the customer journey in that case is still interesting enough to be solved. But I think where we don't have this full picture is in sales, in connection with marketing. There's also a very classical conflict. Sales thinks marketing does not deliver leads. Marketing thinks sales does not work on the leads they got or cannot say what they really need. And these silos do not really work. But I even saw in big companies silos within a CX organization. So you had in one insurance, I met people who work very professionally on a customer feedback program. And I said, and what do you do to make a change of closing the loop happen in your organization? Said, not my business. There is another department, which is organizational development. And I said, wow. That makes your life really complicated because, yes, but we decided to move on. Otherwise, we would have had even more discussions. And I think that is a really difficult situation for anyone who is responsible for customer experience management if you don't even have these two groups together in one.
It starts with yourself, right? Like if you don't do it, then it's hard to convince others, I guess. So and I guess also customer service are mainly digital or systems and digital channels that are easily to track and log and categorize or the issues. Whereas in sales, of course, a lot of still happens maybe verbally or in person or in and maybe a bit easier. So you also need to make an effort to make sure that insights gained in that phase of the journey are also captured somewhere. And so that you can actually align those channels. Is that fair, or have you seen examples where this worked really well already?
I think in the real world, it's a fair argument, but don't tell this to a Salesforce guy because the whole system is based on that.
Right.
So the link of nurturing and then closing the deal through sales. And I think being myself, having been a salesman, you hate to protocol what you've done. But if you're really honest, you hate also to confess that you totally forgot what you agreed with the client. If it is in an early phase, you simply forget things. So and this is what I learned from these big software or platform sellers. They have a professional sales team. And for them, it is the most natural thing to feed the systems because they are also incentivized on that. For us as researchers, this was a completely different world. Actually, we went there and we saw the nice people talking, and then we got the problem, and then we made a nice.
So why is that SaaS companies manage to really organize that whole funnel from sales to execution better than more classical companies? Is that the incentives that they receive, or is it more they have less legacy?
They have experienced professional sellers. In my industry, in research, it was more in the beginning, especially. You sold yourself. You were not only the seller, you were also the doer. So people bought you as a person. In a software company, you don't buy the person, you buy the software. So for that reason, this conflict never existed. So that you have, for example, you stopped selling because I think, if I win another project, I need to stop sleeping. And when I saw that there are also some really professional sales skills you need to have to make big enterprise sales, because the buying points are so much more complicated than just a market research department, then I acknowledged that, yes, there is room for professional sellers because they need time just to find out who they need to move when in order to really find out what is possible at a given point in time and what can be implemented in that organization. And I think, for example, consultants in top management consultancies have the advantage that they have these conversations on top level. If you're 2 levels down, then you already need to understand all the different players. And there are a lot of players beginning from IT, HR, then the silo you want to optimize. That makes the whole sales process so much more complicated. And then you need systems and processes to follow up in order to, and also the projects need a lot of additional information where you need also a lot of people in the back who provide you with technical information, with legal information. the whole process is so different to selling a single research program.
Yeah.
So that for that reason, it were always two worlds, but we learned fast and we learned a lot from these guys.
What I would add to that, I mean, I fully agree with you, but what I would add to that is also typically younger SaaS companies have, from their startup time, started with tools like HubSpot or Pipedrive or like what have you, and have organized their funnel around it, and basically also make clear commitments. So like, I do this and then I hand it to you, and then kind of like they've grown with this way of working. Whereas classical industry companies, large organizations, of course, have been existing for 50 years or more. There's a lot of legacy and DNA also in historical ways of working that were maybe never like this. So you're also kind of like fighting the system of change, I guess, in this organization to introduce this. So I think there's and like you said, that it's more. I think you made that point in the beginning. Is more almost like a change management issue than a technical or research issue. It's more like, how do you get the way of working adopted in these organizations?
Exactly.
Does that mean you also spend a lot of time on that? Yeah, because that being the bottleneck, or what would you say?
Actually, as at the end I was leading the practice, I spent more time with clients than, and I approached these. I approached the big pitches, worked on the big pitches, not necessarily really liking it if you go into very much detail what you need to deliver.
Yeah.
I always preferred having the conversations with clients when they had a system implemented, how to improve it, how to make the most out of it, and also acknowledging where the limits of what you have bought, without giving them the feeling you bought something wrong. Because, for example, this is an open question example. If you have a classical voice of the customer program, you ask, how would you recommend, based on the experiences you made in the shop yesterday, would you recommend this company who sells products? Who sells products is actually, you need to know that this company just sells products. So yes, you get a valid answer on the information why people would recommend the shop. But if you search for answers, what exactly they liked about the product, then you should have asked a different answer. And I even had discussions on that, saying we can go through all these. We have 10,000 of feedbacks. Yeah. And of course, someone said something about your product, but only because he didn't understand the first question, or by chance. So what can you learn from that? If you want to know that, just ask the question. And there comes in again the research quality into these more technical platforms. So if you can do whatever you want with any kind of data set you have. But if you don't know what you do, you still don't find what you want to find, or you cannot find what you want to find because you made a mistake in the beginning.
Yeah. So I think that's the kind of like analysis issue of like, if the data is not rich enough, then you can't really get out of it what you want to know. But I think the other flip side is also like, if you have a certain strategy for how you want to differentiate your experience, like you mentioned Amazon, for example, in the beginning, then also you need to know what are the key moments in your whole experience or journey that you want to improve. So actually making it more intentional, or having also a plan for what you want your experience to be, or what you want your experience to be strong at. And so you also might want to make sure, I guess, that it's not just reactive, as in we're fixing things that are broken, but also you also have ideally an ambition for what you want, how you want your experience to be better than your competitor. Is that any learnings on that you've seen around, like companies who did that well to make it more strategic?
My perception of many of these discussions, also even still today, is that it's easier to make a brainstorming on wow effects than healing frictions. And whenever I meet a client, I would always argue, first of all, what do you know about your customer journey, and what are the pain points, and what do you do to solve the pain points, before you want to deliver this extra quality your competitor doesn't have. Because in reality it's and this is also true if you have various outlets. Don't make the already very good ones even better. They will become better on their own. Just try to reduce the number of those who perform poorly. Then you have a much bigger lever on the overall customer base. And I think also in the customer journeys, I saw when there was an analytical framework for the journey, because it's also not trivial to analyze a customer journey in a valid way. Now we have a few new approaches, and I know that you are also working with They.do. That is one of these platforms that allow you to look a bit deeper into the journey itself, and it's not limited to pure customer feedback, because sometimes you have all the relevant information for the touch point already at hand. You simply need to see that in the right moment at the right touch point. And but I think here we are just in the beginning, and because in most of the cases, companies are now quite clear what would be more or less the customer journey. If they're lucky, they have an accepted journey model in the organization, so everybody is open and willing to go through a journey and using specific personas to understand a bit the journey. And they say, look, if there is, if I see a pain point that comes from my silo, I accept it and I will change that. Because if you're not at that point, you don't even, you still need to work on the framework. I remember a huge automotive manufacturer had a journey team, and they came to us and they asked me, look, we made the perfect customer journey in automotive sales. I said, okay, you would be the first one, but okay. Yes, at least we have a model, and the board says it's okay, but nobody lives that model. And now we would like to ask you to push that through the organization. I said, no, I'm sorry, that's not an outsider job. That's your job. And if they don't adapt the journey, probably this journey is not ideal for this specific country. If you make a globally a common journey for the whole world, usually you never have a good solution for any of the countries. So you always need to adapt it a bit. And I think maybe we are a bit further in that, and people understand, yes, we need to think about the journey, and there's something before and there's something after, and there's also something I cannot really influence, but I need to know what happened there. Yes, we are there, but we are not at a point that many companies really sit like in a video game looking, look, now I see there's the scores going down there, the scores going down there. Now run, fire department, run. Go out and
so yeah, actually coming back to your point around it's more difficult to get people to act on the insights than to actually get the insights. So I think that's more of also a mindset change, but also agreeing on a way of working, right? So to say like, hey, if we get these insights, who is going to pick them up, and do they also get targets and capacity and time to address those issues, or is it a side job? I mean, I'm not sure if you've seen other success factors or companies that you've learned from that did this well, that you can maybe use as an example.
In the last 3 years, I spoke to many customer experience manager in the financial services industry, mainly in insurance companies. And as there is quite some pressure in Germany, there are many different insurance companies also at even rather small. There are not just a few very big ones. So, and everybody needs to optimize the process, also because they have a cost and resource issue of people they don't find on the labor market anymore. So they are really willing to rethink their customer journey. But they are limited to change the customer journey because they have so many heritage systems that have all the customer data. And it's not just, you need not to handle just one customer data, probably you even have 10. And there is one that has, for a certain category of insurances, a specific customer database that should not be linked to another category. Health insurance versus life insurance. And
you mean the systems?
There are also circumstances.
Systems. Yeah, they are.
Even if everybody is willing, you need to acknowledge that you cannot move as fast as you would want because you don't have the technical infrastructure, especially in companies that are longer than 20 years on the market and still successful.
So what is a good approach then? To do it like to start on a smaller scope, and then scale it later, or like not have this ambition to do it end to end overnight, or like what is the way to for those companies? Because there are a lot of companies, of course, with this legacy of technical infrastructure that cannot be changed overnight. Like, what would you advise to those people? Like, how can you still make a difference, or how do you start in that situation?
If I have the chance to have this discussion, which you don't always have, because
Right.
you would need to have a clear idea on the long-term roadmap of the IT department.
Yeah.
If they don't sit on the table and you just have people who can tell you from hearsay what's the long-term plan of IT, you cannot advise anything, because actually, first of all, you need to find out when is which system established. I spoke 2 months ago, I spoke with a company. They established Adobe Cloud and Salesforce at the same time. Then he said, I also want to reorganize the customer. I said, no, just establish these two. Then you're already on a go. Then this is the prerequisite for everything you want to do afterwards. And rather let that happen well, so that you can rely on your sales data and on your marketing data. And then let's take the next step. And I think most of the people who are responsible for making a change in the organization say, I'm so much willing, I'm so motivated, but IT always lets me down. That is what I always hear. It's IT. And if you have done an interview with the IT guy, you said, look, have you seen my roadmap? Do you know what I need to do? I need to integrate a whole new platform in customer service. Do you think that I have the appetite to change anything until I did not move everything from A to B until that works? And this is a program of 2 years. And if these are the conditions you need to work in, then I would say, look, decide if you want to put any resources on that at that very moment, because it's really important to have the first thing fixed. Then you can do the next thing. And maybe you find something, if you have the acceptance in the organization, then you rather choose another battle.
Exactly. Or go upstream and say, hey, is this really our priority? Then fine, I'm happy with that, but then also don't expect me to make a big progress here.
Exactly.
And then you can say, okay, if that's the case, then if that's the strategic priority, fine. Instead of complaining about this IT guy, say, okay, but then let me find another opportunity that I can actually address while this migration is going on. For example,
yes. And if you're in a bad situation, then your boss says, "Look, I'm not really interested. Just do what I told you."
And sometimes, of course, you need to address service optimizations, of issues. But sometimes you can also address certain things for the time being in communicating your offering in a different way, or setting expectations in a different way. So sometimes there are also alternative ways of, softening the issues while they cannot be addressed, maybe. And this is also something that, if you're a bit creative, sometimes you can work with, maybe.
That is actually what I found for me as a nice job now, because I see sometimes the limitations, and I can accompany, and this is what I also do, I can accompany those people who have the responsibility and say, look, I cannot talk to my boss like that. Then let's test the arguments first. I'm not your boss, but I think I can imagine what your boss would say. And just to make the whole thing not frustrating, and maybe find an intelligent approach to achieve the best possible in a given situation.
Yeah, and sometimes also you can really work on more like way of working improvements if you don't necessarily always have the systems yet, you can already get started maybe on a smaller scale. We've actually seen that quite a lot in organizations where we say, let's just find something where it really hurts. And like, for example, in one bank that we work with, there was a lot of customer service calls on a specific product for a specific issue. And that's basically performance data that indicated this. And then let's just understand what's causing that issue, and maybe just try to tackle some of those things. And actually, some of the issues we addressed were not even didn't even require any digital efforts. Yeah? So sometimes you can, of course, you're not always that lucky, but sometimes you can also really.
But you will always find something. There is always something you can find, and if you are able to frame your work around a continuous improvement process, just like Toyota does that to the max, which is, by the way, a very old concept, and which I also learned when I worked for Toyota.
Yeah.
So I could not believe that they really live it in every meeting. So they really were there with their A3s, and you went through all the. But this makes sense because you worked on the root cause and you tried to solve the root cause, and it was not.
Yeah.
And sometimes you end up with, look, for that we need a different platform. But in most of the cases, it was not. And what can we still do with the systems we have? It's more the discipline to work on improvements.
In your experience, a lot of customer insights or feedback or insights or research-driven insights, maybe. You also mentioned, data points can, of course, also be very interesting. And I think we see increasingly that, yes, get feedback insights or research-based insights plotted on the customer journey, but also get performance metrics plotted in that same journey, like conversion rates of drop-off rates or upsell percentages or like loyalty churn numbers, etc. And especially if you can link them to certain touch points, then of course they also give extra weight maybe to the commercial impact of some of these issues versus others. Like, do you have experience also in using systems to connect the two and the performance metrics with the customer insights?
Actually, for me, there are different maturity and specializations levels of those platforms. I know two who are very professional in customer journey orchestration, which is CX Omni, and they do with slightly different approaches. But one I know a bit better.
Same goal.
I work with them. Yeah. And then there's just mapping software, and this serves a certain purpose at a certain moment in time. And on the other hand, if you look into the dashboarding possibilities of huge voice of the customer platforms, if you want, you can build everything in there. What I see is that many companies don't build it in these platforms, but they try to build it in their business intelligence platforms they have.
Yeah.
And out of a sudden, the whole topic wanders from CX into a analytics team, which has a technology that allows you to do analysis on topics which they probably are not even aware of, because that's more the specialization of the other guys who would like to do everything on their platform. But I think the trend will go into I had a long discussion with Maxi Schmidt from Forrester. She said, look, the trend will be they will reduce those platforms, because actually if you have double functions, then they say, why should we pay for that? And if the pressure comes, then only one lead system will survive. And I guess
but Peter, in the end, this is also a governance question, right? Like if the organization says, how do we actually report on things? How do we actually prioritize on things? Then there's usually a dashboard that's being pulled up or some sort of governance instrument that people are using. So, and I think I can imagine if you're the CX guy and you're in the kind of like nice to have department, then you want your metrics to be on that dashboard. Yeah? Sure. But the thing you lose with that is that you lose all the context of the journey and the touch points, because it becomes almost like an isolated metric that it starts to mean a lot less if it's not linked to a specific touch point or channel. Yeah. So I think
absolutely, but.
Yeah, go ahead.
Those guys make their dashboards for decades. And if you talk to people in the CRM department and data analytics department, which are sometimes even far bigger than the research departments, they say, look, people don't listen to us. People don't want to understand how we made it. And actually, they have exactly the same problem like the researchers. And I think that is also something which we discussed for decades, but it is never wrong. If you want to have an impact, you need to have people who drive topics. And even if you're not fascinated by a dashboard, it's good enough if you're fascinated by that person, because then they can move things.
Yeah. And for me, it's always a red flag.
Dashboard never drives change.
If somebody says, oh, the IT guys don't listen to us, or the marketing guys don't understand us, or the business manager doesn't listen to me, I mean, most cases, you're actually not good enough at explaining how it contributes to it, I think. Yeah? Because, I mean, of course, there is it may be complicated, but in the end, you can conclude that you didn't manage to convince them that it matters. And I think
you didn't understand the pain this person had, because the most important thing is to translate what you find out into the world of a person who probably did not even ask that. And he said, And if you don't make that link, whatever you find out is just for your own personal entertainment, but not helping someone else. And I think that happens to classical researchers, that happens to all the business analysts, that happens to many staff departments. They make a huge analysis, but the people on the ground don't get the point. But that is
and in
not
most
my
cases,
problem.
there's a logical, like you say. In most cases, there's a lot. I mean, sometimes it may be political, but in most cases, there's a good reason for why it's not other people's priority. And then I think that's also why I like the customer journey management approach, is because what it does, it takes it out of your silo and it expands it into a more multidisciplinary discussion, making it a shared problem instead of your own problem alone, and also making everybody understand how everybody's efforts contribute to the end-to-end customer experience. But the risk there is, of course, if you make it too big, there's too many people involved and it becomes too messy. So the trick is actually to keep it small enough and focused enough on a specific target group or a specific service, maybe, but make it multidisciplinary enough so that you collectively care and that you make the right trade-offs as a team. And this is a fine balance, I guess, in terms of organizational complexity and at the same time addressing something relevant for the customer.
I found one very nice example in an insurance company, which wanted to prepare the whole organization to a more systematic change process. And they said, look, our overall theme is that we want to improve any customer journey that exists. And we do that step by step. And we start with one and we apply certain techniques, certain procedures, involve certain experts, but we always involve also the person who at the end, when we have everything reorganized, needs to run the journey or has the most of the responsibility for it. And actually by this, we train this person how to think in journeys. I found that extremely clever because everybody knew something will change. Then let's just work on the right way on it. And let's show me how I can manage the whole process afterwards with tools I could learn during the development phase of optimizing this journey.
Yeah, I like that perspective. And one thing I've learned is that it's quite important, and actually maybe even crucial, that this person who kind of orchestrates or owns or manages the whole journey is not using or responsible for a CX only perspective, but actually a multidisciplinary perspective. So we said actually a journey is not owned by a CX team. I mean, the journey is actually the service offering of a company. And ideally, the journey owner or journey manager or whatever title you give to this role should be responsible for the commercial performance of that journey, the operational efficiency of that journey, and the customer satisfaction of that journey. And if that's the case, then this person will also balance customer satisfaction, commercial performance, and operational efficiency in the trade-offs and the prioritizations. And then, but as long as a journey stays a CX-only customer experience perspective, then you're kind of still operating on your own in that sense, is my view.
That is why I like the approach of this insurance company, because actually typically the managers were sitting then for the first journeys, they were all sitting in customer service and they knew we get a new technology, we can do, we can replace a few steps, we can with artificial intelligence, we can reduce the time that it takes to check, for example, an invoice from a doctor or so. And I could not agree more.
Cool. What we see now, and this is more like, of course, here comes the AI component of this podcast, but almost obligatory topic. I think what we see now, and I speak to a lot of guys, is the potential. Of course, it's quite complicated to mine all that customer service calls and feedback solutions, and especially if you have joined a company 2 years ago and then you don't have all this legacy and knowledge of what was before. So I think also what we see increasingly now is that with AI, you can also easier mine or analyze huge data sets unstructured across different systems and let kind of like AI do the monkey work instead of having to map all the journeys. And then, at least getting a head start on plotting what are the key issues and then take it from there so that this whole build up and ramp up time to get insights in place doesn't take that long, and you can actually show results quicker or act on the key issues quicker. But it also takes away a little bit, of course, the human interpretation of these things. Like, what's your view on this? Like, where this might go? Like, have you have a perspective on that?
Yeah, I have a twofold perspective on that, because actually I love technology, so I'm really keen on seeing all these things working.
Yeah.
At the same time, I did a podcast with a lady from a research unit in the banking industry who said, look, I play around also with ChatGPT to do certain analytics, but when it comes to the point of calculating, you cannot be sure that it always comes to the same result. And said, look, I'm an analytical guy. I mean, that's the only thing I want to be really trustful, that on a formal level, they can count always the same way, and 1 + 1 is always 2, and not probably 3, or in one case even 4. And I think that is the with any, at least with artificial intelligence at the level we have it today, we don't have enough checks and balances to really be sure if a structure that is found is the structure that is found, or it's just an outlier. And if we think like the classical programmers or analytic people who would not accept a deviation because they say, look, it's a logical formal thing, it's right or not right, then we will be very disappointed of what is possible. And the other thing, I also had a discussion with a client recently who said, look, the number of people who can understand by their gut feeling that something is wrong in the interpretation goes down. Because if you're 20 years in the business,
true understanding.
You understand. For example, I had research programs where I would say, look, this looks so logical, something is wrong in the data. I don't believe that. It can't be true. That's too good to be true. That is what we decide. And if the outcome is exactly what we wanted to have as an outcome, something is wrong. Let's check and check and check. And this is not so much possible anymore when you have huge data sets. With someone call it A, B, or C, crawling through all these data. I also wonder, I heard that, or not from first experience, also for customer data platforms, you could use artificial intelligence to bring together different data sets and to do the monkey work. But who gives me a guarantee that the monkey work is not done really by a monkey? Or at least he had a bad day, and out of a sudden the whole process does not really work. So, and I don't know if we still invest enough of artificial intelligence to check if what we do is really correct. Right now, we are also excited about what is possible with one shot, but maybe we need 5 control shots to be sure that the one shot.
I'm sure there will be some iterations, and I think, and also one thing I think is like ChatGPT is of course one thing, and because it's actually good at generating pieces of text and not at calculations maybe, but also tools like you mentioned, like Qualtrics and Dado are also building AI into their system. So, and of course they will. I'm sure they're making great efforts to also make sure that it is doing the right thing. But I'm sure, just like a human being, they won't get everything right. I'm sure, but I do understand your point, though, that in the past, when you were a researcher, you also have your own true understanding of these needs, and then you can still cross-check them. But if you no longer do the interviews or no longer do the research, then also your common sense of your natural instinct goes away. And then there's a risk of being led by the data that is generated for you. Yeah. So one of the things that we still do is if we use AI interviewing tools, we still do like 5 interviews ourselves, because we still, as a research lead, you still want to understand what you're talking about and not just take it for granted. Yeah.
In which context do you use AI interviewing technologies?
Yeah, it can be normally in the past it'd be like 20 interviews of customers, but then now that maybe you do 5, and then instead of a survey, you actually do 50 interviews with like a chatbot tool like Tell It, for example, or there are other tools that are available that can really do natural language interviewing done by AI. But the point is, of course, it can do like 50 in an hour. And instead of where with human beings it might take a few weeks. So
but you forget the respondents at the other end.
Sure.
That's nice from your perspective. I can do 50 in an hour. Yeah. I don't give a shit what if the other things look. No, I'm not worth having a personal interview. You want my opinion. You want me to deep dive into your needs. but you just send me a bot. Look, that also does something with the answer. I know there's a lot of research right now about, is a bot as good as an interviewer? And I mean, even at the last ESOMAR Congress, there was one company that could show that people even found it more entertaining talking to a bot. Look, but if a company who sells exactly these services makes this kind of research, I still have my doubts that this is always the case. And even if an interview for 10 minutes is perfect, and in minute 15, I find out, hey, I'm talking to a bot. And that does something. This is a customer experience itself again.
Yeah.
And you would never do that in B2B because you don't have so many customers.
That, and also if you have a big issue and you're annoyed, then you don't feel important if you're basically delegated to a bot. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. Very good point. And I think that's all these things, I guess, we'll probably learn how to balance the application of these tools and when not to use them. Yeah. So
by the way, probing on an NPS question can be perfectly done with a bot.
Yeah.
It's less complex and you just ask 2-3 times. Are you sure?
Yeah, and then it's
what
actually
do you mean?
more
rich. Could you
And then
that
you can actually have rich
sense.
follow-on questions instead of just static questions. So maybe it's more of a way to get qualitative surveys rather than quantitative interviews, if you will. So I think that's maybe a good way to think about it. So, all right, Peter. Well, thanks. One of the final questions we always ask is who else should I invite on this podcast? Can be in Germany, doesn't have to be, but who would be a great person to also talk to about how we can connect silos for brands to actually deliver on their promise?
I have a good friend of mine who is Greg Ulioni, who does the CX Goalkeeper podcast in Switzerland. And this guy, actually, we both started our podcasting careers something like 5 years ago. We both still do it. And he he brings in international experts to his podcast, and his podcast is in English. And I decided to make my podcast just in German language because there are so many in English. So I didn't want to have another one in English. I tried to work on a USP. And but Greg is a great interview partner, a very nice person. I warmly would recommend, and I will tell him upfront.
Yeah, let's. If you could introduce him, and I'll follow up with him.
Yeah.
And then finally, is there any advice you would give anybody in customer journey management, whether it's CX or not, but more like anybody who's trying to deliver a great customer experience and a great service to customers? With any advice on progressing in their careers and doing things better?
I would say, first of all, you do the right thing. Because actually, if you want to make the life of others easier, more satisfying, then you do the right thing. But in order to do the right thing, don't let you get frustrated by organizational constraints. Understand what your constraints are. Stay curious and stay critical, because not every solution is a solution for every customer. And stay creative.
And don't take things too personal, is what I'm hearing you say as well.
Yeah, and don't take things too personal. Yes, absolutely.
Right. There's a reason why people have other priorities sometimes. Wonderful. All right. Thanks, Peter. Thanks so much for this inspiring conversation. We'll see each other on LinkedIn, and good luck with your podcast. Cheers.
Thank you.
So that was another episode of the Promise Podcast, where we discuss effective ways for brands to deliver on their promise with a great customer experience and business impact. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to like, subscribe, or leave a review. Check haroldlammers.com for more great content. Hope to see you again in the next episode. Until then, keep pushing to deliver on the promise.